it's Avarice Rose. Welcome back to my channel, and today we are going to be diving into two more haunted castles of Scotland, and I am so excited to share them with you. I have found two really good ones, so it's gonna be great. One thing that I absolutely love about researching different castles from different countries in the UK is they all have a special history to them, and I really enjoy learning about each and everyone's history and kind of piecing together what might make the spooks of that castle tick. So grab a drink. I have an iced coffee right here, homemade, because we're still not going hardly anywhere because pandemic. Grab a snack, a blanket if it's nighttime and you just want to be cozy. It's like 100 here in Texas, so no blankets for us. But let's jump into episode 3 of Haunted Castles of Scotland, and we're going to be going to Edinburgh Castle first. Edinburgh Castle is a historic fortress that is situated atop of Castle Rock overlooking the city of Edinburgh, and it is an impressive structure. Archaeologists have established that human occupation on this Castle Rock has been there since the 2nd century AD, which is the Iron Age. So they're not really sure about the original nature of human occupation on this rock, but it's been there for a very, very long time. There has been a royal castle at this location since the reign of David I back in the 12th century. And the site continued to be a royal castle residence until 1633. From the 15th century, the castle's royal residence job as a royal residence declined, and by the 17th century, its principal use was for military barracks and garrisons. It is very important to Scotland's national heritage because this was the place where some of the most historic battles were fought in the wars of Scottish independence, and also the Jacobite uprising in 1745. Research undertaken in 2014 identified 26 sieges in its 1,100-year-old history, which gave it the claim to be the world's most besieged castle in Great Britain and one of the most attacked castles in the entire world. Currently, right now, you can visit Edinburgh Castle when we're not in a pandemic, and it's in the capital city of Edinburgh, Scotland. And from pictures that I've seen, I so want to go so badly. It's beautiful, but spooky. With so much history behind it, this castle has been said to be one of the most haunted places in Scotland. And it would be a huge surprise to people if it had no spooks involved. It's been the site of attack, war, executions, criminal cases, even a brief capture by the English. So there is a lot of loss, a lot of history, a lot of blood seeped into the land of Castle Rock and Edinburgh Castle. So in 2001, Edinburgh Castle became the site of one of the largest paranormal investigations in history. A team of 9 researchers and over 200 members of the public explored the castle's forgotten chambers and secret passages for signs of ghostly happenings, and which were not. The public wasn't told which parts of the castle were supposedly haunted or rumored to be haunted and which were not, so they were basically going in blind. 51% of the participants in the haunted areas reported paranormal experiences, and only 35% did so in the non-haunted areas. Shadowy figures, sudden drops in temperature, and feeling something tugging on your clothes are all everyday experiences in Edinburgh, and were all things that people experienced during this investigation. So now that we have a little bit of science to back up some of the mysterious, creepy goings-on in this castle, let's get into the ghosts. Like most castles, Edinburgh Castle had a dungeon where prisoners were frequently beaten, tortured, and sometimes perished. The dungeons here at Edinburgh are haunted by the ghosts of those who either spent time here or died here within the dungeon walls. Colored orbs and strange clouds of mist are regularly photographed by visitors. One story of a desperate prisoner chose to hide out in a dung barrow, thinking that no one would be willing to search for him there, and hoped to be carried out of the castle down the Royal Mile and escape to freedom. However, he did not anticipate the way that the castle staff used to dispose of the dung. Shockingly for him, he died when the barrow was emptied down the rocky slopes of the castle, sending him to his death. Visitors have claimed that his ghost tries to push them from the battlements, and a strong, unpleasant smell of dung follows. That's really unfortunate. Find the perfect way to escape through the dung and only to be pushed off a cliff. Ew. One ghost is said to be the ghost of a young boy who plays bagpipes. This mystery dates back to several centuries when numerous tunnels were found underneath the castle that led to Holyrood Palace at the bottom of the Royal Mile. When the tunnels were discovered, there were great curiosity to see where the tunnels beneath the castle would lead. However, the entrance was only small enough for the local piper to get through, and he was a boy, so he was sent down to investigate. As instructed, he played his bagpipes loudly as he walked through the tunnel. Above the ground, people were able to keep track of where he was based on the sound and trace his progress and figure out where the tunnels went. And then all of a sudden, the bagpipes stopped somewhere near the site of Tronkirk, a church which is a recognizable landmark on the Royal Mile. Search parties undertook rescue attempts, but the piper boy had seemingly vanished. Sadly, the boy was never found, and although there were multiple attempts to recover him, they didn't find any trace of him. Disturbed by his disappearance, though, the city council ordered the tunnel to be sealed. However, with Edinburgh being a paranormal hotspot, the story doesn't end there. Ever since his disappearance, many people have reported hearing the faint underground sound of a single bagpipe played far below Edinburgh Castle and the Royal Mile. In 1650, there's a story of a phantom headless drummer boy seen wandering around the castle walls, with his eerie music being heard by those below. Legend has it that whenever the drummer boy's ghost is spotted, the castle is about to come under attack, and perhaps he is alerting those in charge that a threat is on its way. He was first seen in 1650, shortly before Oliver Cromwell and his army attacked Edinburgh Castle. Edinburgh Castle hasn't been attacked for some time now, which could explain why he hasn't been sighted by anybody alive today. No one knows who the boy is or why he haunts the castle, but his apparition suggests that he was beheaded. No one knows for certain what happened to him. Now, I have saved this story for last because it will somewhat tie into our next stop in Scotland. So the story of Janet Douglas is a tragic story of revenge against an innocent young woman orchestrated by the king at the time's James V, who succeeded by accusing her on a baseless charge of witchcraft and poisoning. Her father, George Douglas, Master of Angus, went on to marry James V's widowed mother, Margaret Tudor, who was Henry VIII's older sister, and virtually controlled the kingdom by claiming to be acting on behalf of the young James. After Douglas and Janet's brother fled to Scotland, she was summoned to court on a charge of communicating with her exiled brother, but refused to appear and thus forfeited herself. She and her family were besieged in Glamis Castle and then seized and brought to Edinburgh. Though she was a woman of high stature, she was accused of trying to poison the king and also of witchcraft, and it took to the torturing of Janet's servants and friends to try and gain any evidence against her on those charges. So what they would do in those times, if they really wanted to get you, they would take your friends, take your family, take your servants, and they would just torture them until they said what they wanted them to say. Sadly, nothing could save Janet, so on the 17th of July, 1537, on what is now the esplanade of Edinburgh Castle, she was burned at the stake with her 16-year-old son forced to watch. She was described as, in the prime of her years, a singular beauty, and suffering through all, though a woman, with a manlike courage. After Lady Janet's execution, the Grey Lady began appearing at the castle. A knocking sound can be heard in what is thought to be the hammering of the workmen building the scaffold on which Janet was burned alive. Visitors to the castle have reported seeing the ghostly figure of Lady Janet roaming the halls and weeping. Lady Janet's story was one in thousands of innocent women in Scotland who became victims of Scotland's obsessive witch hunting. Lots of women in Scotland, as well as in England, were accused of witchcraft, and the punishment for that is obviously burning at the stake. Edinburgh Castle has a dark history, a royal history, and currently boasts a very spooky present. So this next castle we are going to talk about is Glamis Castle, which is, we talked about Janet Douglas's unfortunate capture from here, but also it has a little bit more of present day ties to the current royal family. Lums Castle is situated beside the village of Glamis in Angus, Scotland. It is the home of the Earl and Countess of Strathmore and Kinghorn and is open to the public when we're not in a pandemic. Lums Castle has been the home of the Lyons family since the 14th century, though the present building dates largely from the 17th century. Glamis was the childhood home of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, wife of King George VI. Their second daughter, Princess Margaret, Countess of Snowdon, was born there. So the current Queen Elizabeth II's mother, grew up in this castle. The castle is protected as a Category A listed building, and the grounds are included on the Inventory of Gardens and Design Landscapes in Scotland, the national listing of significant gardens. So the vicinity of Lums Castle has prehistoric traces. For example, a noted intricately carved Pictish stone known as the xxoo stone was found in a creek bed at the nearby village of Essie, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly. Might be ASC or Essie or AC. In 1034, King Malcolm II was murdered at Lums Castle, where there was a royal hunting lodge. In William Shakespeare's Macbeth, there's a character who resides at Lums Castle, although the historical Macbeth had no connection to the castle. By 1372, an actual castle had been built at Glamis, since in that year it was granted by King Robert II to Sir John Lyon, Thane of Glamis, husband of the king's daughter. Glamis has remained in the Lyon, later Bowes-Lyon, family since that time. The castle was rebuilt as an L-plan tower house in the early 15th century. So this castle is where Queen Elizabeth II's mother grew up. It's where Princess Margaret, the late princess, who is Queen Elizabeth II's sister, was born. And currently, Glamis is the home of Simon Bowes-Lyon, the 19th Earl of Strathmore and Kinghorn, who succeeded to the earldom in 2016. So I'm assuming there is a relation with the royal family there, whether it be a cousin or something like that. So why are we talking about Lums Castle with the royal connection? Because it holds a monster, possibly a monster. The most famous legend connected to Lums Castle is that of the Monster of Glamis, a hideously deformed child born to the family. Some accounts came from the singer and composer Virginia Gabriel, who stayed at the castle in 1870. In the story, the monster was kept in the castle all his life, and his suite of rooms was bricked up after his death. Another monster is supposed to have dwelt in Loch Calder near the castle. An alternative version of the story is that every generation of the family, a vampire child is born and is walled up in that room.
What?
There is also an old story that guests staying at Glamis once hung towels from the windows of every room in a bid to find the bricked up suite of the monster. When they looked at it from the outside, several windows were apparently towelless. The legend of the monster may have been inspired actually by the true story of the Algavides. Somewhere in the 16-foot thick walls is the famous Room of Skulls, where the Algavide family, who sought protection from their enemies, the Lindsays, were walled up to die of starvation. So, who knows? Another legend tells that the 15th century Earl Beardy, who has been identified with both Alexander Lyon, the second Lord Glamis, and with Alexander Lindsay, 4th Earl of Crawford. Several versions of this legend exist, but they all involve Earl Beardy playing cards. However, it was the Sabbath, and either his hosts refused to play or a servant advised him to stop. Lord Beardy became so furious that he claimed that he would play until doomsday or with the devil himself, depending on the version. Then a stranger appears in the castle and joins Lord Beardy in a game of cards. That stranger is identified with the devil, who takes Earl Beardy's soul and in some versions condemns the Earl to play cards until doomsday. Another haunt for Lums Castle is that in 1034, King Malcolm II was mortally wounded in a nearby battle and taken to the Royal Hunting Lodge, which was on the site of the current Glamis Castle. And he died. The late Sir David Bowes Lyon, while taking a late stroll on the lawn after dinner, reportedly saw a girl gripping the bars of a castle window and staring directly into the night. He was about to speak to her when she suddenly disappeared, as if someone had torn her away from the window. So if you ever get the chance to go visit Glamis Castle, there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of intrigue, there's a lot of legends, there's a lot of lore that goes with it. So I would highly suggest that you do your research before, that you focus your attention on some of the reported secret hiding places, like there's a supposed secret passageway and multiple rooms, just to keep your eye out for something that might be a little bit off. So that's all I have for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video on Edinburgh Castle as well as Glamis Castle, and we will be going on to episode 4 next week. I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to be doing next week, but I may not do a castle. I may do a kirkyard, one of the most famous in all of Scotland, but don't quote me on that because I have to do some major digging, which is so much fun for me. So if you have not subscribed, guys, please subscribe, hit that like button so you always know when I post a video. Leave a comment down below if you have any suggestions for places that I should be researching in Scotland, and I will see you in the next one. One love, guys.